I am thrilled today's guest. Arthur Brooks is a legendary philosopher, teacher, columnist, author. I don't want to be silly and call him the happiness guru, but that's who he is. He's one of the most interesting guys around. He's written 13 books. The last two were number one Times number one bestsellers, including his book co-written with Oprah, Build a Life You Want, The Art of Science of Getting Happier. And before that, it was Strength to Strength. And he's got a book about loving your enemies. And we got so much to talk about. He writes a weekly column in The Atlantic that is a must-read on happiness. And that's the simple way of putting it. He's a professor at one of the most popular professors at Harvard and Kennedy. Is it called the Kennedy Center? This Kennedy School?
Kennedy School.
Kennedy School. Kennedy Center is in Washington. He just is got so much to talk about. It's really my privilege to have you today, sir.
Thank you, Donny. How nice to meet you. I've been looking forward to meeting you for years. You've fired up a lot of people in the right direction to become more successful, and I appreciate that a lot.
Well, speaking of success, I've kind of followed one of your roadmaps, whereas I kind of keep reinventing myself. I mean, you're a guy, you were playing your horns in your 20s, and then you go to being an economics professor, and then running the American Enterprise Institute, probably the most prestigious conservative think tank, to becoming an author and happiness Sherpa. How did that all happen?
I have this sort of theory of the case that you can take your career down to the studs every decade or so and reinvent yourself. And it's a pretty interesting way to do it. And it's based on this, believe it or not, there's research on this, that there's kind of 4 types of people with 4 different types of careers that can make them happy. There are the people that at business school, we try to push everybody into. That's these linear careers where you only change jobs when there's something bigger and better in your field. And so you're just kind of going up and up and up and up and up. But that's not the only kind of way to get to be happy, depending on the kind of person you are. Some people are more sort of steady state. They don't change very much. That was my dad. Had the same job for 40 years. Liked it.
Most people.
Most people. Certainly our grandparents were like that. There are some people that are transitory. They don't, they wouldn't work if they didn't have to. They would move to Portland or retire at 29 if they could. And that's called a transitory career where you only work to pay the rent. But a lot of us, like you and me, and a lot of people listening that have followed you for many years, are called the spirals. And the spirals have a series of mini careers inside their heads. What they really are is entrepreneurs in the business of their own lives. That's the most important enterprise any of us can undertake. You got to build your own beautiful life where the currency is not money or power. The currency is love and happiness. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you got to find different manifestations, learn new skills. Every 7, 10, or 12 years, you think of something in your mind's eye that you want to do differently. And that's what I've done. That's what you've done. And a lot of people are doing that.
In a chapter in one of my books, I call it the multiple mountain theory, that, the irony is most of us climb to the top of the mountain and we get self-actualized and we make money and we get all kinds of things. And then there's just degrees of success at that point. There's no more margin of failure. But if you create a new mountain to farm, the joy is getting there. And that's so much of your thesis about happiness, that we're never going to be happy. It's not about the destination. It's getting there. And
it's the progress.
That's it. That's it.
It's that humans are made for progress. This is one of the reasons that people really fail and struggle a lot in life, is because they suffer from what we call in my business the arrival fallacy. The fallacy that I feel better when I'm making progress. So when I'm actually going to get to the goal, it's going to be great. But there's a reason that Olympic athletes are often very depressed after even winning a medal. That when people hit their weight goal, they're losing weight. About 30% develop an eating disorder after they hit their goal. Because the real joy comes from the progress, and getting to the goal itself is actually a lot less satisfying than anything else. And you got to be making progress over the whole course of your life, which is obviously what you've been doing.
You've talked about kind of the 4 pillars of success and the 4 misnomers, the 4 kind of head fakes of success. Talk to me about each of those.
Yeah, I mean, the Mother Nature doesn't care if we're happy. This is a very important thing I have to impress on my MBA students at Harvard. That, we think we're sort of innately bred to think that if I get money, power, and pleasure and fame, then happiness is going to come automatically. And perfectly, because, you're a very famous guy and a lot of famous people, that's not how you get happy. On the contrary, sometimes it's in spite of those things that you wind up getting happy. Yeah. And everybody listening to us who wants to be Donny Deutsch is like, okay, let me try, is the whole problem. I'll let you know if I get there at that point. But it's true. And there's a ton of research. There's nothing wrong with money or fame. There's nothing wrong with any of these markers of success, but they're intermediate goals. They're not the ultimate goal. You got to use them for something else. And the something else to truly get happy is to focus your attention on your sense of philosophy or faith in life, the things that are bigger than you, your family relationships, the mystical relationships you didn't choose, your friendships, real friends, not deal friends. And last but not least, it's actually doing something productive with your life that's meaningful and serves other people. That's it. Faith, family, friends, and work.
What I found fascinating reading up on you a little bit is that you describe yourself as not a particularly naturally happy person. And I found that fascinating.
That's why I study happiness.
Yeah.
We study the thing that we actually want. Very few people start off fabulously successful, but those who are kind of obsessed with the success equations, they want it a lot because they didn't have it, is how it turns out. And for me, happiness is something that I found really hard, really elusive. I come from an incredibly gloomy family. And I'm a PhD social scientist. And finally, my wife said, look, buddy, why don't you study something that's actually useful, like your own happiness? Set yourself a strategy, set it up in the right way. And I thought, I don't know, man. I mean, maybe happiness is like, I can study it, but it's like astronomy. I can't change the stars. Or maybe it's actually something more applied. And so, I set out to create a program for my own life. And it was so successful that I wound up quitting my CEO job and moving to Harvard to teach it to, I hope, the next generation of leaders. I mean, with expertise, a commitment to change your habits, and then spreading it to other people, man, you can really raise your happiness a lot.
Speaking of happy, your day is a definition of kind of a lot of your pinpoints of happiness. What you actually do, Arthur, is how you spend your day. I just kind of went through it. And that's kind of tools you can use. You're practicing what you preach.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the class that I teach at Harvard is about 30% neuroscience, actually. And we have to understand that when it comes to happiness or anything else in our lives, that psychology is nothing more than biology. And if we don't understand the underlying neurobiology of what's actually going on between our ears, we're not going to be able to master the psychology that leads us to the experience of greater well-being. And so that starts with optimizing your own neurobiology, which is what I try to do. I mean, I use what I teach, I use what I know and the science behind it to optimize and engineer my own experience of life, which starts with my day. So there's a ton of research. But by the way, there's a ton of
So you take me through your day. You start at 5 o'clock working. Because each one is kind of a signpost for kind of a lot of your theories.
Yeah, for sure. And based on the scientific literature as well. I get up at 4:45 every morning. Very important. And actually that gets back to an ancient Indian theory called Brahma Muhurta, which is the creator's time. And there was this theory in ancient Indian civilization, if you get up an hour and a half before the sun comes up, that you optimize the rest of your day across a whole bunch of different supernatural dimensions. Well, modern research shows that your attention is better, your mood is better, your focus is better, your learning is better if you get up before the sun comes up. It's a really important thing to do. It's an important discipline. Then the two things to do are, before you use any stimulants, any outside, anything that would, and when I say stimulants, I mean not just caffeine, I also mean social media and any of the electronic stuff that we do to try to enhance our experience of life, that you actually focus on body and soul, because body and soul are intimately entwined. So I get up and within the first 20 minutes, I'm in the gym. So, I'll usually stretch and pray a little bit, and then I'm in the gym and I'm lifting heavy every day for 60 minutes. I try to get 60 minutes of lifting and 10,000 steps, which is, I'm turning 60 this year. And
I hear you, brother. 66 is worse. I got to.
Yeah, if I had your head of hair, dude, I could be president of the United States. Look at you.
I used to be in great shape. I'm a testament to how workout is so important, because I was addicted like you for 20 years. And the last 6 months, I fell off for some reason. So you'll get me back on track. But go on.
It's just, and
it's everything.
And by the way, as you know, lifting heavy is the secret to aging well.
Do you know that I did it with Joe Scarborough last night. He said the exact same thing. He said the key is lifting. Everything else is important, but lifting heavy, that's the key. It's 12 hours
heavy and keep moving. Lift heavy and keep moving. That's it. And so don't be sedentary. And obviously there's a lot of other things to do. And that's where, after my 60 minutes of lifting and taking my shower, then I go to mass every day. I'm a Catholic and I practice my faith. And people who are not Catholic can do something like that, so they get the soul in after the body. And only after I've been awake for 90 to 120 minutes do I introduce anything artificial, such as caffeine. Caffeine should never be to wake up. It should only ever be to focus. You should only enhance to focus, never to wake up, because your introduction to the day should be very organic. And again, this is based on scientific research, but kind of common sense.
Right.
And then my brain chemistry is optimized. I can have the optimal amount of dopamine in my prefrontal cortex, which allows me to focus, and I can get an entire morning of writing. There's no other way to do it. And then, by the way, no distractions. You know,
you don't take Zoom calls until noon. That's it. Yeah, you keep it to yourself.
Yeah, and if you're anybody who's writing, doing quantitative analysis, any business modeling, anybody who uses their brain, they need uninterrupted deep work time, and they need it to be optimized by using that kind of a routine that depends on the science.
That's amazing. It's safe to say a turning point in your life. This is just my take in reading up about you, was the prayer breakfast in 2015, where you were coming off the American Enterprise Institute, still there. You had been so much about a compassionate conservatism and talking about kind of what I would want, what most people I know would want. And then you got up and gave a speech, and then Trump just went as far. We know where Trump went. And that was your moment where you're like, maybe the world's going in a different direction than me.
Yeah. And we all have these epiphanies from time to time. I was aware in 2019 or 2020, early in 2020, before the coronavirus epidemic shut everything down, I was the keynote at the National Prayer Breakfast. That's a big deal in religious circles.
It's a big deal everywhere. It's a big deal in political circles. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And a lot of people go to it. It's 4,000 people at the Washington Hilton. And it's always a keynote speaker who talks for half an hour. Then the president of the United States speaks, the vice president, the speaker of the House, everybody's there. And it was very fraught in February of 2020. That was when Trump had been impeached. And then he was actually not convicted by the Senate. So it was this moment where, everything was on fire in Washington, D.C. And I was up there on the dais between Mike Pence, who I've known for many years, and Nancy Pelosi, who I've known for a long time. And Donald Trump was on the other side of the dais, and it was super tense. And so I get up and I give my talk. It's called Love Your Enemies. Mm-hmm. It's based on Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Because, I'd written a book called
basically the Donald Trump philosophy, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right, Donny. You got it. So, and it was, it got, they were very, the audience really liked it. It was a standing ovation, the whole thing. But here's what I was trying to do, because, this was the morning after he had been, after the Senate had failed to convict the president of the United States and remove him from office. So he comes in holding a newspaper saying, not guilty, with a newspaper. And he's taunting Nancy Pelosi. And the whole thing is it's just a bad situation. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it's bad behavior all around for a really good and civilized country. So I had this thought, Donny. I was thinking, I'm going to give this talk called Love Your Enemies. And I was praying. I literally went to confession that morning before I went to that thing, because I was like, I want to be as pure as I can possibly be to deliver this address. I thought, and wouldn't it be great if Donald Trump said, okay, yeah, I can't stand Nancy Pelosi, but good point, and walked around behind me and shook her hand. And we had this moment of daytime. No. He gets up after me and says, "Yeah, I love hearing Arthur Brooks give a speech. Love your enemies. That's awesome. But I disagree." And I'm like, he just disagreed with Jesus at the National Prayer Breakfast.
That's amazing. He's
got guts, man. But the other point about this is, however, not to gild the lily or something, but one of the reasons I love America is, we're in a very difficult position politically. There's a lot of contempt and, bitterness. I got up and I disagreed with the president of the United States on international television. It was international news. And I went home that night and there was no thug at my door. I didn't lose my job.
Yeah, wait till if he gets reelected. All right, we'll see. We're not going to get into politics here, but that could change. I've talked about it on the air, and I've said that he tells you what he's going to do, and if he's in another term, you don't have to comment on this. If he's in another term and there's no guardrails, he'll go after his enemies.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I will be looking for a job.
Yeah, so we'll see. So in all the statistics in the last decade, happiness quotients are way down.
Yeah.
One of the obvious places, and it's because all it does is perpetrate the four things you say you shouldn't go after, is social media. Right. It shows fame and luxury and power and money and status and whatnot. And I see my kids, and I see myself even, It's even on, oh my God, my life sucks. Look at this curated, amazing, wonderful life, and here's what I'm not at. So imagine a 13 and 14-year-old. So are we almost, is it an arithmetic certainty that we're going to be breeding less happy generations going forward?
That's a good question. And we don't exactly know the answer to this, but you're pointing out something that's really important before we make some predictions on that. The United States has been going generally the wrong direction in happiness since about 1990 on average. That doesn't mean every person is getting unhappier, but the average level of happiness in the country has been going down for over 30 years at this point. The climate reasons for it, the climate of happiness, I don't mean literally the climate, but the climatic reasons are faith, family, friends, and work. The things that we, the big four, they're all going in the wrong direction. So that's what's kind of ticking us down. But then there's these storms. And the first storm was 2008, 2009, when social media went on everybody's device. And it was especially deleterious for young adults. It has gotten worse and worse and worse for people of all different ages. And the reason is because if there's one thing that I could do to make America happy today, it's more eye contact and more physical touch with actual human beings, because that increases the level of oxytocin.
Could not agree with you more. Yeah,
it's a neuropeptide in the brain. We're made for it. Mother Nature wanted us to have eye contact and touch, and she gave us all these incentives like happiness to be in contact with our kin, with our tribe, with our people. This is super important, and social media mediating the social life that people actually have, no eye contact and no touch. And that's this is one of the big reasons that people are really suffering, because the overuse, the technology is fine. It's just overusing it is bad. Yeah. It's like wine is fine, but if you drink 3 bottles a day, it's going to be a big problem.
Yeah. I worry. It's the one thing, not the one thing. I see it as the devil. I really do. Where I see it. Let's go to a little happier topic. So during COVID, not COVID's happy, but somewhat known person named Oprah Winfrey starts reading your columns in the Atlantic. And she calls you and just invites you over for dinner. I'd like to hear about that phone call, that you get a phone call. Oprah wants to have dinner with you.
Yeah, no, it's funny because, as you know, when you're doing stuff in the public sphere, I mean, you've been throwing stuff out into mass media for a long time. I mean, when you're trying to say things that are useful and helpful to a lot of people, you don't know who's consuming it.
I always try to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You always did. I find you very positive and very affirming. You've been helpful to me. And that's great, but you don't know who's listening. You don't know who's reading.
Yeah.
So I have about 500,000 readers a week in my column in The Atlantic, which comes out every Thursday morning. It's called How to Build a Life, about the science of happiness for a lay audience, not for scientists. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that Oprah was one of my regular readers all the way through the coronavirus epidemic. And I had a book that came out in 2022 called From Strength to Strength, Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. She bought it and read it on the first day it was available, after having read my columns for a couple of years. And that's when she called and said, "This is Oprah Winfrey." And I'm like, yeah, and this is Batman.
Right.
I mean, but it was Oprah Winfrey. And she said, "Let's do something together." I thought, heck yeah.
Yeah, let me check my calendar. Right? I'll see if I can slide in
let me think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
It was phenomenal because, we got to talking. I did her podcast. She has a book podcast called Super Soul, which is really high quality because she's so good interviewing authors. She's been doing it for many years and is the best in the business. And then she has a web show called, it's called The Life You Want, with, a live audience. And we worked with a live audience. It's kind of like her old show. And then she calls me, and she was, we were texting each other a lot at that point. Finally, she texts me or calls me one day and says, if I still had my show, I'd have you on 30 times. Right. And then you'd be, you'd have,
Dr.
I'd launch you into my audience.
Right.
She said, but I don't. So how about if I host a book that we co-author? I said, how do you host a book? And she said, let me show you. We'll write the science. We'll write the book. You do these main parts, and I'm going to wrap around it. And so I went out to her place. Actually, before that, I had gone out to her place in Montecito, and we hit it off like a house on fire. I mean, like, what do you want to do? I want to lift people up and bring them together. What do you want to do? Same thing.
Okay. Let's right? Let's be besties. Yeah. Okay.
Totally. I mean, it's like, life is short. You're going to lift people up or you're not. You're going to bring people together or you're not. And you got to decide. And I do it with science and ideas, and she does it with mass media. And so I flew out to her place, and we hung out for a bunch of days. It turns out that it was better for me to stay in her guest room than her to stay in my guest room. Right?
Just a wild guess. I probably would have come up with that. Right. Okay. Right.
I don't have as many acres.
Right.
And it was fabulous. It was fun. We had our meals together. We laughed a lot. We framed up this book, and then I went away. I was staying in Usually I stay 6 or 8 weeks a year in San Clemente, California, during the winter when it's nice, so that I can have a happy wife. And I was out in San Clemente and I was looking at the Pacific Ocean. I was sending chapters back and forth up the coast to Montecito, where her place is. And the book came together. And that was the story of Build the Life You Want, this book that came out last September. And now we're just thinking about new projects, new ways that we can band together and lift people up and bring them together in happiness and love.
I watched the interview you guys did. I think it was CBS Sunday mornings what you guys were on together.
Yeah.
And you had this great kind of humble, like I'm sitting here with Oprah. How fucking crazy is that? That came across in the screen. And you seem to. This is the first time we're chatting, but you humbly own your success, and that's a really appealing trait.
I appreciate that, Donny. And part of the reason is because if it's true, it's because I recognize that the world pays attention to you not because of the milkman, but because of the milk.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's really because you've got something to deliver, and the responsibility is to deliver it and deliver it and deliver it, and not to start thinking that it's not me. It's just that I kind of stumbled across a new way of talking about the science of happiness and using my skills to bring that idea across. And it takes you have to have a little bit of humility about that to recognize that people are paying attention to the ideas and you're just delivering ideas. And you got to get serious about delivering the ideas and not starting to think that actually I could be talking about anybody and they'd care.
But what you threw out something before about you throw something out, you don't even think about how it's affecting. I know for me, one of my great moments was I was speaking somewhere and a woman in her mid late 30s comes up to me and goes, I have to tell you, you changed my life. And I'm like, oh, she goes, you were on the Today Show once and you were talking about how women, when she hits a certain age, fuck getting a guy, go have a kid. And if you're worried about that's going to make you less attractive to a man, that's going to make you more attractive. And then she goes, and that kind of turned me on. I got pregnant on my own and I'm like, holy shit. Give me your 3 moments where somebody came up to you and said, Arthur or Professor Brooks, this is how you touched me. This is where you go, hey, you know what? I'm doing pretty good,
Yeah. I appreciate that, Donny. And there have been moments like that where people will talk ordinarily about the love in their life and recognizing that the love in their life is the single most important thing. And it'll be, I've talked to, it's funny. I was talking to a woman that you and I both know on Wall Street who has a named firm, very, very famous, very, very wealthy woman, more or less our age. And she had confessed to me that she was really unhappy. And I said, why? And she said, well, I'm roommates with my husband. I'm cordial with my adult kids. All I do is work. And I think that I'm losing crispness in my decision making. People but my name's on the sign, so what are they going to say? Right. But I'm not earning it in the same way that I used to be. I'm not getting their confidence on the basis of my excellence. And meanwhile, I'm drinking too much. I don't feel like I'm not getting into the gym and I'm not happy. She's just like, what should I do? And I said, what are you talking? You don't need a Harvard professor to tell you what to do. I said, you've just written your own prescription. I mean, go away with your husband, take a souvenir in your firm, step back, let somebody else run it, get into rehab, get into church, get into something and get to know yourself because you need to reconnect with love in your life. Why don't you do that? And she said, I've always known that, but I haven't done it because I guess I've always chosen to be special rather than happy.
Interesting.
And I'm like, boom. And that moment and following up with her, she's chosen to be happy rather than special. And it was that conversation that really helped her a lot, that really changed her a lot. And that was, again, that wasn't my ideas. That was just me facilitating her ideas. That was just me bouncing back the ideas that she had. And almost all of the conversations where the penny is dropped for somebody is that they've recognized that they were seeking something. And what I was able to do, fortunately, I was in the right place in the right time to help them understand that they weren't seekers. They were being sought and they needed to stop and get found is what it came down to. Found by their children, found by their friends, found by their husband or wife, found by God. They needed to stop because they were being sought. And that insight actually came from them and just reflected off me.
Let's do a little clinical work here because it's a little bit talking about what you just talked about with this woman. And if somebody said to me, Donny, are you happy? I'd pause and I'd say, and I'd take an inventory and say, I've got these amazing children. I've got an amazing group of friends. I'm healthy. I've had 2 really exciting careers. But I'd go, but I feel like everything is not in front of me anymore, and I don't feel as young as I used to, and I kind of miss running a company. Like I start to chip away at it, where I know intellectually I have every right to feel better than I think I do. I wouldn't say I'm an unhappy person, but I also wouldn't describe myself as a happy. I find myself with a little bit of a tortured soul, but I go, oh, well, that's what makes Donny run. And so it's this kind of weird treadmill. So I gave you the quick 60-second descriptor. I just love your thoughts.
Yeah, so that is the classic profile of the entrepreneur. And what that is happy but discontented. That's what it is.
Well put.
That's what's going on. And part of the reason is because almost all entrepreneurs, if I were to give you the personality test that I often administer, which is the positive affect, negative affect sequence. It's the PANAS test, PANAS. And listeners who want to take it, they can take it for free on my website at arthurbrooks.com, and you can find out what profile you are. Now, everybody's one of four basic mood level or mood balance levels. There are people who feel positive and negative affect very intensely. Those are called a mad scientist. Donny, you're a mad scientist.
Yes,
you're a
mad
scientist. You feel intense positive and intense negative.
Amen.
And I'm sure your wife's like, it's hard to be married to you.
Well, I've been married twice and it hasn't worked out. So we have clinical proof.
And my wife reminds me how hard it is to be married to me because I'm the maddest of the mad scientists too. Yeah. Most people like you, most entrepreneurs, most of the people that follow you and say, I want to be like Donny Deutsch, they're mad scientists too. But you got to understand there's a cost to being a mad scientist.
Well, that's why I related to when you told me about the woman who said, I always want to be special versus happy.
Yeah, so totally. But there are the other three quarters of the population, by the way, are people who are high positive and low negative. Those are the cheerleaders. God bless them. Yeah. People who are high negative and low positive, the poets, they struggle, but they're super creative. And there's the low affect people. Those are the judges. And there's all different kinds of people out there. But a lot of people who are very successful entrepreneurs, one of the things that they're doing is they're chasing the dragon. They're always chasing the dragon. And chasing the dragon means, yeah, of course I'm happy, but I'm very unsatisfied.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And that's your destiny. There's one thing that you can do, which is to get more and more in touch with your spiritual side. And that's one of the ways you'll be better and better at managing your high negative affect. That's number one. Number two, the second best way to manage your negative affect, so it doesn't manage you, is in the gym, hit it hard. And one of the reasons is that when you get in the gym and you hit it hard, especially with high weights, what you're doing is that you're managing your cortisol and other stress hormone levels. You're managing your own adrenal system so that it's not just pumping stress hormones into your system at the smallest stimulus. So those are the two ways to do it is, and again, you asked me before, what do you do in the morning? I beat myself up and I go to church.
And then you pray. Yeah.
That's why.
I got you. Arthur, so give me your prognostication for the country's happiness quotient at this moment. If for the next 5 years, where you kind of put everything into the test tube and you see everything that's going on, we don't have to go through a litany of what's right and what's wrong in the world. Is there something that tells you we're heading in a better direction or we're going a little towards the cliff?
Now, I think we're actually going in a better direction. And I'm very hopeful and a little bit optimistic. Hope and optimism are not the same. Hope means there's a lot we can do. Optimism is just a prediction. And so I'm mildly optimistic and I'm very hopeful. And the reason for that is that I think that that people are starting to recognize that there's a grave happiness crisis. And second, that our leaders are deeply malignant narcissist bullies, and they're actually feeding on our fear and our hatred.
Yes.
And this happens inside countries. This is not unprecedented. And what happens is that you get into a paradigm. It's called the dark triad paradigm. The dark triad is a constellation of personality characteristics.
That's sociopaths you described as
the dark triad. They have psychopathic traits. Sociopathy is actually funny because it's not clinically defined, but psychopathology really is. Plus Machiavellianism, plus narcissism. Those are the three that it's in 7% of the population that are above average on those three traits. Like, no joke, they're dangerous people. Don't date them. Don't work with them. Don't vote for them. The trouble is that countries will traditionally get into this polarization. Well, they will elevate dark triads to political office and to media positions. And this is all the activism on college campuses and the activism inside companies is largely driven by dark triad personalities. And the fruit of this is that they want power. They're manipulating people with fear and anger, and people get more and more and more miserable until they rebel. The 97% of us that are not dark triad personalities will rebel against the 7%. That's typically what happens. And I think we're almost there. So paradoxically, the reason, Donny, that I'm hopeful and a little optimistic is because it's that bad.
Yeah.
It's because it's actually that bad. And people won't put up with that forever.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you. And I kind of agree we're coming to this is, call it hopeful, call it optimism. It depends on your description. That people are seeing that this anger doesn't work. It's not getting us where we need to. And I think one more loss, and I think this presidential election is just so important for so many obvious reasons, but I think it is truly for the happiness soul of the country in a certain way also. It's really interesting. Arthur Brooks,
I agree. I agree. And we need to urge that along. Look, people are listening to this podcast is because they're serious about being leaders. They're serious about their own careers. So use your leadership. Everybody listening to us, use your leadership to stand up to the malignant narcissistic bullies that are trying to hurt us. And you got to stand up to people on your own side. That's the key. If you're a Republican, stand up to the Republicans. If you're a Democrat, stand up to the Democrats. It doesn't help if you're a Democrat and you stand up to Trump. It doesn't help.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. Arthur Brooks, what an absolute privilege to talk to you. Continued success, his most recent book, Build Your Life You Want, The Art of Science of Getting Happier, co-authored with somebody named Oprah Winfrey. And keep doing God's work, man. You're doing great stuff.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I've had such admiration for you for a long time. I hope this is the first of many conversations.
And do me a favor. I don't know how often you get to New York. I'd love to grab a coffee with you.
I would love that. I was in New York just all week doing TV, as a matter of fact. And next time I'm down, I usually come down once a month. The next time I'm there, I'll give you a ding.
Promise. Good to see you, my friend. Stay well. Stay healthy.
See you later.
Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.